Memory. How to develop, train and use it. 1919 by William Walker Atkinson. In the past few years a widespread mental and spiritual awakening has taken place among the people of this country. And this new awakening has been very aptly called the New Psychology movement, because it has to do with the development and expression of the mind, or soul, of both the individual and the nation. Contents. 1. Memory, its importance. 2. Cultivation of the memory. 3. Celebrated cases of memory. 4. Memory systems. 5. The subconscious record file. 6. Attention. 7. Association. 8. Phases of memory. 9. Training the eye. 10. Training the ear. 11. How to remember names. 12. How to remember faces. 13. How to remember places. 14. How to remember numbers. 15. How to remember music. 16. How to remember occurrences. 17. How to remember facts. 18. How to remember words, etc. 19. How to remember books, plays, tales, etc. 20. General instructions. Chapter I. Memory, its importance. It needs very little argument to convince the average thinking person of the great importance of memory, although even then very few begin to realize just how important is the function of the mind that has to do with the retention of mental impressions. The first thought of the average person when he is asked to consider the importance of memory is its use in the affairs of everyday life, along developed and cultivated lines, as contrasted with the lesser degrees of its development. In short, one generally thinks of memory in its phase of a good memory as contrasted with the opposite phase of a poor memory. But there is a much broader and fuller meaning of the term than that of even this important phase. It is true that the success of the individual in his everyday business, profession, trade, or other occupation depends very materially. 7. 8. Memory. Upon the possession of a good memory, his value in any walk in life depends to a great extent upon the degree of memory he may have developed. His memory of faces, names, facts, events, circumstances, and other things concerning his everyday work is the measure of his ability to accomplish his task. And in the social intercourse of men and women, the possession of a retentive memory, well stocked with available facts, renders its possessor a desirable member of society. And in the higher activities of thought, the memory comes as an invaluable aid to the individual in marshalling the bits and sections of knowledge he may have acquired, and passing them in review before his cognitive faculties. Thus does the soul review its mental possessions. As Alexander Smith has said, a man's real possession is his memory. In nothing else is he rich, in nothing else is he poor. Kitchener has said, memory is the only paradise from which we cannot be driven away. Grant but memory to us, and we can lose nothing by death. Lactantius says, Ori tempers prosperity, mitigates adversity, controls youth, and delights old age. Its importance 9. But even the above phases of memory represent but a small segment of its complete circle. Memory is more than a good Ori, it is the means whereby we perform the largest share of our mental work. As Bacon has said, all knowledge is but remembrance. And Emerson, memory is a primary and fundamental faculty, without which none other can work, the cement, the bitumen, the matrix in which the other faculties Ties are embedded. Without it all life and thought were an unrelated succession. And Burke, there is no faculty of the mind which can bring its energy into effect unless the memory be stored with ideas for it to look upon. And Basile, memory is the cabinet of imagination, the treasury of Arie. Sun, the registry of conscience, and the council chamber of thought. KKNT pronounced memory to be the most wonderful of the FAC. Ultis. K, one of the best authorities on the subject, has said, regarding it, unless the mind possessed the power of treasuring up and recalling its past experiences, no knowledge of any kind could be acquired. If every sensation, thought, or emotion passed 10 memobi entirely from the mind the moment it ceased to be present, then it would be as if it had not been, and it could not be recognized or named should it happen to return. Such an one would not only be without knowledge, without experience gathered from the past, but without purpose, aim, or plan regarding the future, for these imply knowledge and require memory. Even voluntary motion, or motion for a purpose, could have no existence without memory, for memory is involved in every purpose. Not only thfe learning of the scholar, but the inspiration of the poet, the genius of the painter, the heroism of the warrior, all depend upon memory. Nay, even consciousness itself could have no existence without memory, for every act of consciousness involves a change from a past state to a present, and did the past state vanish the moment it was past, there could be no consciousness of change. Memory, therefore, may be said to be involved in all conscious existence, a property of every conscious being. In the building of character and individual ity, the memory plays an important part, for its importance 11. Upon the strength of the impressions received, and the firmness with which they are retained, depends the fiber of character and individuality. Our experiences are indeed the stepping stones to greater attainments, and at the same time are guides and protectors from danger. If the memory serves us well in this respect, we are saved the pain of repeating the mistakes of the past, and may also profit by remembering and thus avoiding the mistakes of others. As BD says, when memory is preternaturally defective, experience and knowledge will be deficient in proportion, and imprudent conduct and absurd opinion are the necessary consequence. Bain says, a character retaining a feeble hold of bitter experience, or genuine delight, and unable to revive afterwards the impression of the time, is in reality the victim of an intellectual weakness under the guise of a moral weakness. To have constantly before us an estimate of the things that affect us, true to the reality, is one precious condition for having our will always stimulated with an accurate reference to our happiness. The thoroughly edu 12 memory Kate man, in this respect, is lie that can carry with him at all times the exact estimate of what he has enjoyed or suffered from every object that has ever affected him, and in case of encounter can present to the enemy as strong a front as if he were under the genuine impression. A full and accurate memory, for pleasure or for pain, is the intellectual basis both of prudence as regards self, and sympathy as regards others. So, we see that the cultivation of the ori is far more than the cultivation and development of a single mental faculty. It is the cultivation and development of our entire mental being, the development of our selves. To many persons the words memory, recall, lection, and remembrance have the same meaning, but there is a great difference in the exact shade of meaning of each term. The student of this book should make the distinction between the terms, for by so doing he will be better able to grasp the various points of advice and instruction herein given. Let us examine these terms. Locke, in his celebrated work, the essay Co. Its Importance 13. Concerning Human Understanding, has clearly stated the difference between the meaning of these several terms. He says, memory is the power to revive again in our minds those ideas which after imprinting have disappeared, or have been laid aside out of sight. When an idea again recurs without the operation of the like object on the external sensory, it is remembrance. If it be sought after by the mind, and with pain and endeavor found, and brought again into view, it is recollection. Fuller says, commenting on this, memory is the power of producing in the mind former impressions or percepts. Remembrance and recollection are the exercise of that power, the former being involuntary or spontaneous, the latter volitional. We remember because we cannot help it, but we recollect only through positive effort. The act of remembering, taken by itself, is involuntary. In other words, when the mind remembers without having tried to remember, it acts spontaneously. Thus it may be said, in the narrow, contrasted senses of the two terms, that we remember by chance, but recollect by intention, and if the endeavor 14 memory be successful, that which is reproduced comes, by the very effort to bring it forth, more firmly entrenched in the mind than ever. But the new psychology makes a little different distinction from that of Locke, as given above. It uses the word memory not only in his sense of the power to revive, etc., but also in the sense of the activities of the mind which tend to receive and store away the various impressions of the senses carried and the ideas conceived by the mind, to the end that they may be reproduced voluntarily, or involuntarily, thereafter. The distinction between remembrance and recollection, as made by Locke, is adopted as correct by the new psychology. It has long been recognized that the memory, in all of its phases, is capable of development, culture, training, and guidance through intelligent exercise. Like any other faculty of mind, or physical part, muscle or limb, it may be improved and strengthened. But until recent years, the entire efforts of these memory developers were directed to the strengthening of that phase of the memory. Its importance 15. Known as recollection, which, you will remember, Locke defined as an idea or imprese. Zion sought after by the mind, and with pain and endeavor found, and brought again into view. The new psychology goes much further than this. While pointing out the most improved and scientific methods for collecting the impressions and ideas of the memory, it also instructs the student in the use of the proper methods whereby the MEM may be stored with clear and distinct impressions which will, thereafter, flow naturally and involuntarily into the field of consciousness when the mind is thinking upon the associated subject or line of thought, and which may also be recollected by a voluntary effort with far less expenditure of energy than under the old methods and systems. You will see this idea carried out in detail, as we progress with the various stages of the subject, in this work. You will see that the first thing to do is to find something to remember, then to impress that thing clearly and distinctly upon the receptive tab. Let's of the memory, and to exercise TNE re. 16 memory. Membrane in the direction of bringing out the stored away facts of the memory, then to acquire the scientific methods of recollecting special items of memory that may be necessary at some special time. This is the natural method in memory cultivation, as opposed to the artificial systems that you will find mentioned in another chapter. It is not only development of the memory, but also development of the mind itself in several of its regions and phases of activity. It is not merely a method of recollecting, but also a method of correct seeing, thinking, and remembering. This method recognizes the truth of the verse of the poet, Pope, who said, "Remembrance and reflection how allied. What thin partition sense from thought divide v***. Chapter 2. Cultivation of the memory. This book is written with the fundamental intention and idea of pointing out a rational and workable method whereby the memory may be developed, trained, and cultivated. Many persons seem to be under the impression that memories are bestowed by nature in a fixed degree or possibilities, and that more can be done for them. In short, that memories are born, not made. But the fallacy of any such idea is demonstrated by the investigations and experiments of all the leading authorities, as well as by the results obtained by persons who have developed and cultivated their own memories by individual effort without the assistance of an instructor. But all such improvement, to be real, must be along certain natural lines and in accordance with the well-established laws of psychology, instead of along artificial lines and in defiance of psychological principles. Cull. 17. 18 Memory. Cultivation of the memory is a far different thing from trick memory / or feats of men. Tal legerdemain, if the term is permissible. K says that the memory is capable of indefinite improvement. There can be no man of doubt, but with regard to the means by which this improvement is to be effected, mankind are still greatly in ignorance. Dr. Noah Porter says, the natural as opposed to the artificial memory depends on the relations of sense and the relations of thought. The spontaneous memory of the eye and the ear availing itself of the obvious conjunctions of objects which are furnished by space and time, and the rational memory of those higher combinations which the rational faculties superinduce upon those lower. The artificial memory proposes to substitute for the natural and necessary relations under which all objects must present and arrange themselves an entirely new set of relations that are purely arbitrary and mechanical, which excite little or no other interest than that they are to aid us in remembering. It follows that if the mind tasks itself to the special effort of considering objects under these artificial cultivation of memoki 19 lations, it will give less attention to those which have a direct and legitimate interest for itself. Granville says, the defects of most methods which have been devised and employed for improving the lies in the fact that while they serve to impress particular subjects on the mind, they do not render the memory, as a whole, ready or attentive. Fuller says, surely an art of mem. Ori may be made more destructive to natural Memory than spectacles are to us. These opinions of the best authorities might be multiplied indefinitely. The consensus of the best opinion is decidedly against the artificial systems, and in favor of the natural ones. Natural systems of memory culture are based upon the fundamental conception so well expressed by Helvetius, several centuries ago, when he said, the extent of the memory depends, first, on the daily use we make of it, secondly, upon the attention with which we consider the objects we would impress upon it, and, thirdly, upon the order in which we range our ideas. This then is the list of the three essentials in the cultivation of the memory: 1. Use and exercise, review. 20. Memory and practice, 2. Attention and interest. And, 3. Intelligent association. You will find that in the several chapters of this book dealing with the various phases of memory, we urge, first, last, and all the time, the importance of the use and employment of the memory, in the way of employment, exercise, practice, and review work. Like any other mental faculty, or physical function, the memory will tend to atrophy by disuse, and increase, strengthen and develop by rational exercise and employment. Within the bounds of moderation. You develop a muscle by exercise, you train any special faculty of the mind in the same way. And you must pursue the same method in the case of the memory, if you would develop it. Nature's laws are constant, and bear a close analogy to each other. You will also notice the great stress that we lay upon the use of the faculty of attention, accompanied by interest. By attention you acquire the impressions that you file away in your mental record file of memory. And the degree of attention regulates the depth, clearness and strength of the impression. Without a good cultivation of memory 21 record, you cannot expect to obtain a good reproduction of it. A poor phonographic record results in a poor reproduction, and the rule applies in the case of the memory as well. You will also notice that we explain the laws of association, and the principles which govern the subject, as well as the methods whereby the proper associations may be made. Every association that you weld to an idea or an impression, serves as a cross-reference in the index, whereby the thing is found by remembrance or recollection when it is needed. We call your attention to the fact that one's entire education depends for its efficiency upon this law of association. It is a most important feature in the rational cultivation of the memory, while at the same time being the bane of the artificial systems. Natural associations educate, while artificial ones tend to weaken the powers of the mind. If carried to any great length, there is no royal road to memory. The cultivation of the memory depends upon the practice along certain scientific lines according to well-established psychological laws. Those who hope for a sure shortcut will 22 Memory be disappointed, for none such exists. As Halleck says, the student ought not to be disappointed to find that memory is no exception to the rule of improvement by proper, methodical and long-continued exercise. There is no royal road, no shortcut, to the improvement of either mind or muscle. But the student who follows the rules which psychology has laid down may know that he is walking in the shortest path, and not wandering aimlessly about. Using these rules, he will add Vans much faster than those without chart, compass, or pilot. He will find mnemonics of extremely limited use. Improvement comes by orderly steps. Methods that dazzle at first sight never give solid results. The student is urged to pay attention to what we have to say in other chapters of the book upon the subjects of attention and association. It is not necessary to state here the particulars that we mentioned there. The cultivation of the attention is a prerequisite for good memory, and deficiency in this respect means deficiency not only in the field of memory but also in the general field of mental work. In all branches of the new cultivation of memory 23 psychology there is found a constant repetition of the injunction to cultivate the faculty of attention and concentration. Halleck says, haziness of perception lies at the root of many a bad memory. If perception is definite, the first step has been taken toward ensuring a good memory. If the first impression is vivid, its effect upon the brain cells is more lasting. All persons ought to practice their visualizing power. This will react upon perception and make it more definite. Visualizing will also form a brain habit of remembering things pictorially, and hence more exactly. The subject of association must also receive its proper share of attention, for one it is by means of association that the stored away records of the memory may be recovered or recollected. As Blackie says, nothing helps the mind so much as order and classification. Classes are few, individuals many. To know the class well is to know what is most essential in the character of the individual, and what burdens the memory least to retain. And as Halleck says regarding the subject of association by relation, when 24 memory ever we can discover any relation between facts, it is far easier to remember them. The intelligent law of memory may be summed up in these words: endeavor to link by some thought relation each new mental acquisition to an old one. Bind new facts to other facts by relations of similarity, cause and effect, whole and part, or by any logical relation. And we shall find that when an idea occurs to us, a host of related ideas will flow into the mind. If we wish to prepare a speech or write an article on any subject, pertinent illustrations will suggest themselves. The person whose memory is merely contiguous will wonder how we think of them. In your study for the cultivation of tire memory, along the lines laid down in this book, you have read the first chapter thereof, and have informed yourself thoroughly regarding the importance of the memory to the individual, and what a large part it plays in the entire work of the mind. Now carefully read the third chapter and acquaint yourself with the possibilities in the direction of cultivating the memory to a high degree, as evidenced by the instances related of the extreme cultivation of Memo E25 case of development noted therein. Then study the chapter on memory systems, and realize that the only true method is the natural method, which requires work, patience, and practice. Then make up your mind that you will follow this plan as far as it will take you. Then acquaint yourself with the secret of memory, the subconscious region of the mind, in which the records of memory are kept, stored away and indexed, and in which the little mental office boys are busily at work. This will give you the key to the method. Then take up the 2 chapters on attention and association, respectively, and acquaint yourself with these important principles. Then study the chapter on the phases of MEM. Ori, and take mental stock of yourself, mining in which phase of memory you are strongest, and in which you need develop. Ment. Then read the 2 chapters on train. Ing the eye and ear, respectively you need this instruction. Then read over the several chapters on the training of the special phases of the memory, whether you need them or not. You may find something of importance in them. Then read the concluding chapter 26 Memo E, which gives you some general advice and parting instruction. Then return to the chapters dealing with the particular phases of memory in which you have decided to develop yourself, studying the details of the instruction carefully until you know every point of it. Then, most important of all, get to work. The rest is a matter of practice. Practice, practice, and rehearsal. Go back to the chapters from time to time, and refresh your mind regarding the details. Read each chapter at intervals. Make the book your own, in every sense of the word, by absorbing its contents. Chapter 3. Celebrated Cases of Memory. In order that the student may appreciate the marvelous extent of development possible to the memory, we have thought it advisable to mention a number of celebrated cases, past and present. In so doing, we have no desire to hold up these cases as worthy of imitation, for they are exceptional and not necessary in everyday life. We mention them merely to show to what wonderful extent development along these lines is possible. In India, in the past, the sacred books were committed to memory, and handed down from teacher to student, for ages. And even today, it is no uncommon thing for the student to be able to repeat, word for word, some volume in a religious work equal in extent to the New Testament. Max Muller states that the entire text and glossary of Panini's Sanskrit grammar, equal in extent to the entire Bible, were handed down orally for several centuries. 27. 28 Memobi. Before being committed to writing. There are Brahmins today who have committed to memory, and who can repeat at will, the entire collection of religious poems known as the Mahabharata, consisting of over 300,000 slokas or verses. Leland states that the Slavonian minstrels of the present day have by heart with remarkable accuracy immensely long epic poems. I have found the same among Algonquin Indians, whose sagas or mythic legends are interminable, and yet are committed word by word accurately. I have heard in England of a lady 90 years of age whose memory was miraculous, and of which extraordinary instances are narrated by her friends. She attributed it to the fact that when young she had been made to learn a verse from the Bible every day, and then constantly review it. As her memory proved, she learned more, the result being that in the end she could repeat from memory any verse or chapter called for in the whole scripture. It is related that Mithridates, the ancient warrior king, knew the name of every soldier in his great army, and conversed fluently in celebrated cases 29. 22 dialects. Pliny relates that Mids could repeat the contents of every book in his large library. Hortensius, the Roman orator, had a remarkable memory, which enabled him to retain and recollect the exact words of his opponent's argument, without making a single notation. On a wager, he attended a great auction sale which lasted over an entire day, and then called off in their proper order every object sold, the name of its purchaser, and the price thereof. Seneca is said to have acquired the ability to memorize several thousand proper names, and to repeat them in the order in which they had been given him, and also to reverse the order and call off the list backward. He also accomplished the feat of listening to several hundred persons, each of whom gave him a verse, memorizing the same as they proceed, and then repeating them word for word in the exact order of their delivery, and then reversing the process, with complete success. Eusebius stated that only the memory of Esdras saved the Hebrew scriptures to the world, for when the Chaldeans destroyed the manuscripts, Esdras was able 30 memobi to repeat them, word by word, to the scribes, who then reproduced them. The Mohammedan scholars are able to repeat the entire text of the Quran, letter perfect. Scaliger committed the entire text of the Iliad and the Odyssey, in 3 weeks. Ben Jonson is said to have been able to repeat all of his own works from memory, with the greatest ease. Bulwer could repeat the Odes of Horace from memory. Pascal could repeat the entire Bible, from beginning to end, as well as being able to recall any given paragraph, verse, line, or chapter. Landor is said to have read a book but once, when he would dispose of it, having impressed it upon his memory, to be recalled years after, if necessary. Byron could recite all of his own poems. Buffon could repeat his works from beginning to end. Bryant possessed the same ability to repeat his own works. Bishop Saunderson could repeat the greater part of Juvenal and Porcius, all of Tully, and all of Horace. Fido Sova, a Bushan peasant, could repeat over 25,000 poems, folk songs, legends, fairy tales, war stories, etc., when she was over 70. Celebrated cases 31 years of age. The celebrated blind Alick, an aged Scottish beggar, could repeat any verse in the Bible called for, as well as the entire text of all the chapters and books. The newspapers, a few years ago, contained the accounts of a man named Clark who lived in New York City. He is said to have been able to give the exact presidential vote in each state of the Union since the first election. He could give the population in every town of any size in the world, either present or in the past, providing there was a record of the same. He could quote from Shakespeare for hours at a time, beginning at any given point in any play. He could recite the entire text of the Iliad in the original Greek. The historical case of the unnamed Dutch man is known to all students of memory. This man is said to have been able to take up a fresh newspaper, to read it all through, including the advertisements, and then to repeat its contents, word for word, from beginning to end. On one occasion he is said to have heaped wonder upon wonder, by repeating the contents of the paper backward, b. 32 memobi, beginning with the last word and ending with the first. Leon, the English actor, is said to have duplicated this feat, using a large London paper and including the market quotations, reports of the debates in Parliament, the railroad timetables and the advertisements. A London waiter is said to have performed a similar feat, on a wager, he memorizing and correctly repeating the contents of an 8-page paper. One of the most remarkable instances of extraordinary memory known to history is that of the child Christian Meineken. When less than 4 years of age he could repeat the entire Bible, 200 hymns, 5,000 Latin words, and much ecclesiastical history, theory, dogmas, arguments, and an encyclopedic quantity of theological literature. He is said to have practically retained every word that was read to him. His case was abnormal, and he died at an early age. John Stuart Mill is said to have acquired a fair knowledge of Greek at the age of 3 years, and to have memorized Hume, Gibbon, and other historians at the age of 8. Celebrated cases 33. Shortly after lie mastered and memorized Herodotus, Xenophon, some of Socrates, and 6 of Plato's dialogues. Bykard Porson is said to have memorized the entire text of Homer, Horace, Cicero, Virgil, Livy, Shakespeare, Milton, and Gibbon. He is said to have been able to memorize any ordinary novel at one careful reading, and to have several times performed the feat of memorizing the entire contents of some English monthly review. De Iasi was able to perform the feat of repeating 100 lines from any of the 4 great Italian poets, provided he was given a line at random from their works, his 100 lines following immediately after the given line. Of course this feat required the memorizing of the entire works of those poets, and the ability to take up the repetition from any given point, the latter feature being as remarkable as the former. There have been cases of printers being able to repeat, word for word, books of which they had set the type. Professor Lawson was able to teach his classes on the scriptures without referring to the book. He, 34 memory, claimed that if the entire stock of Bibles were to be destroyed, Lie could restore the book entire, from his memory. Eve. Thomas Fuller is said to have been able to walk down a long London street, reading the names of the signs on both sides, then recalling them in the order in which they had been seen, and then by reversing the order. There are many cases on record of persons who memorized the words of every known tongue of civilization, as well as a great number of dialects, languages, and tongues of savage races. Bossuet had memorized the entire Bible, and Homer, Horace, and Virgil. Beside Niebuhr, the historian, was once employed in a government office, the records of which were destroyed. He, thereupon, stored the entire contents of the book of records which he had written all from his memory. Asa Gray knew the names of 10,000 plants. Milton had a vocabulary of 20,000 words, and Shakespeare one of 25,000. Cuvier and Agassiz are said to have memorized lists of several thousand species and varieties of honey. Celebrated cases 35. Mals. Magliabechi, the librarian of Florence, is said to have known the location of every volume in the large library of which he was in charge, and the complete list of works along certain lines in all the other great libra. Rise. He once claimed that he was able to repeat titles of over 500,000 of books in many languages, and upon many subjects. In nearly every walk of life are to be found persons with memories, wonderfully developed along the lines of their particular occupation. Librarians possess this faculty to an unusual degree. Skilled workers in the finer lines of manufacture also manifest a wonderful memory for the tiny parts of the fact-yeared article, etc. Bank officers have a wonderful memory for names and faces. Some lawyers are able to recall cases quoted in the authorities, years after they have read them. Perhaps the most common, and yet the most remarkable, instances of memorizing in one's daily work is to be found in the cases of the theatrical profession. In some cases, members of stock companies must not only be able to repeat the lines of the play 36 memory they are engaged in acting at the time, but also the one that they are rehearsing for the following week, and possibly the one for the second week. And in repertoire companies, the actors are required to be letter perfect in a dozen or more plays. Surely a wonderful feat, and yet one so common that no notice is given to it. In some of the celebrated cases, the degree of recollection manifested is undoubtedly abnormal, but in the majority of the cases it may be seen that the result has been obtained only by the use of natural methods and persistent exercise. That wonderful memories may be acquired by anyone who will devote to the task patience, time, and work, is a fact generally acknowledged by all students of the subject. It is not a gift, but something to be won by effort and work along scientific lines. Chapter 4. Memory Systems. The subject of memory development is not a new one by any means. For 2000 years, at least, there has been much thought devoted to the subject, many books written thereupon, and many methods or systems invented, the purpose of which has been the artificial training of the memory. Instead of endeavoring to develop the memory by scientific training and rational practice and exercise along natural lines, there seems to have always been an idea that one could improve on nature's methods, and that a plan might be devised by the use of some trick. The Ori might be taught to give up her hidden treasures. The law of association has been used in the majority of these systems, often to a ridiculous degree. Fanciful systems have been built up, all artificial in their character and nature, the use of which to any great extent is calculated to result in a decrease of 38 memory. The natural powers of remembrance and recollection, just as in the case of natural aids to the physical system, there is always found a decrease in the natural powers. Nature prefers to do her own work, unaided. She may be trained, led, directed, and harnessed, but she insists upon doing the work herself, or dropping the task. The principle of association is an important one, and forms a part of natural memory training, and should be so used. But when pressed into service in many of the artificial systems, the result is the erection of a complex and unnatural mental mechanism which is no more an improvement upon the natural methods, than a wooden leg is an improvement upon the original limb. There are many points in some of these systems which may be employed to advantage in natural memory training, by divorcing them from their fantastic rules and complex arrangement. We ask you to run over the list of the principal systems with us, that you may discard the useless material by recognizing it as such, and cull the valuable for your own use. Memory Systems 39. The ancient Greeks were fond of memory systems. Simonides, the Greek poet who lived about 500 BC, was one of the early authorities, and his work has influenced nearly all of the many memory systems that have sprung up since that time. There is a Romantic story connected with the foundation of his system. It is related that the poet was present at a large banquet attended by some of the principal men of the place. He was called out by a message from home, and left before the close of the meal. Shortly after he left, the ceiling of the banquet hall fell upon the guests, killing all present in the room, and mutilating their bodies so terribly that their friends were unable to recognize them. Simonides, having a well-developed memory for places and position, was able to recall the exact order in which each guest had been seated, and therefore was able to aid in the identification of the remains. This occurrence impressed him so forcibly that he devised a system of memory based upon the idea of position, which attained great popularity in Greece, and zero memory. Leading writers of the day highly recommended it. The system of Simonides was based upon the idea of position. It was known as the topical system. His students were taught to picture in the mind a large building divided into sections, and then into rooms, halls, etc. The thing to be remembered was I visualized as occupying some certain space or place in that building, the grouping being made AC according to association and resemblance. When one wished to recall the things to consciousness, all that was necessary was to visualize the mental building and then take an imaginary trip from room to room, calling off the various things as they had been placed. The Greeks thought very highly of this plan, and many variations of it were employed. Cicero said, by those who would improve the memory, certain places must be fixed upon, and of those things which they desire to keep in memory, symbols must be conceived in the mind and ranged, as it were, in those places. Thus, the order of places would serve the order of things, and the symbols. Memory systems 41. Of the things would denote the things themselves, so that we should use the places as waxen tablets and the symbols as letters. Quintilian advises students to fix in their minds places of the greatest possible extent, diversified by considerable variety, such as a large house, for example, divided into many apartments. Whatever is remarkable in it is carefully impressed on the mind, so that the thought may run over every part of it without hesitation or delay. Places we must have, either fancied or selected, and images or symbols which we may invent at pleasure. These symbols are marks by which we may distinguish the particulars which we have to get by heart. Many modern systems have been erected upon the foundation of Simonides, and in some of which cases students have been charged high prices for the secret. The following outline given by K gives the secret of many a high-priced system of this class, i.e. elect a number of rooms, and divide the walls and floor of each, in imagination, into 9 equal parts or squares, 3 in a row. On 42 memory. The front wall that opposite the entrance of the first room, are the units, on the right hand wall the tens, on the left hand the twenties, on the fourth wall the 30s, and on the floor the 40s. Numbers 10, 20, 30 and 40, each find a place on the roof above their respective walls, while 50 occupies the center of the room. One room will thus furnish 50 places, and 10 rooms as many as 500. Having fixed these clearly in the mind, so as to be able readily and at once to tell exactly the position of each place or number, it is then Necessary to associate with each of them some familiar object, or symbol, so that the object being suggested its place may be instantly remembered, or when the place be before the mind its object may immediately spring up. When this has been done thoroughly, the objects can be run over in any order from beginning to end, or from end to beginning, or the place of any particular one can at once be given. All that is further necessary is to associate the ideas we wish to remember with the objects in the various places, by which means they are easily remembered, and can. Memory systems 43. Be gone over in any order. In this way one may learn to repeat several hundred disconnected words or ideas in any order after hearing them only once. We do not consider it necessary to argue in detail the fact that this system is artificial and cumbersome to a great degree. While the idea of position may be employed to some advantage in grouping together in the memory several associated facts, ideas, or words, still the idea of employing a process such as the above in the ordinary affairs of life is ridiculous, and any system based upon it has a value only as a curiosity, or a mental acrobatic feat. Akin to the above is the idea underlying many other systems, and secret methods, the idea of contiguity, in which words are strung together by fanciful connecting links. Feinagel describes this underlying idea, or principle, as follows: the recollection of them is assisted by associating some idea of relation between the two, and as we find by experience that whatever is ludicrous is calculated to make a strong impression on the mind, the more ridiculous the association. 44 Memoki is the better. The systems founded upon this idea may be employed to repeat a long string of disconnected tards, and similar things, but have but little practical value, notwithstanding the high prices charged for them. They serve merely as curiosities, or methods of performing tricks to amuse one's friends. Dr. Kothi, a German teacher, about the middle of the 19th century, founded this last school of memory training, his ideas serving as the foundation for many teachers of high-priced systems or secret methods since that time. The above description of Feinagel gives the key to the principle employed. The working of the principle is accomplished by the employment of intermediates or correlatives as they are called. For instance, the words chimney and leaf would be connected as follows: chimney, smoke, wood, tree, leaf. Then there are systems or methods based on the old principle of the figure alphabet, in which one is taught to remember dates by associating them with letters or words. For instance, one of the teachers of Memory Systems 45, this class of systems, wished his pupils to remember the year 1480 by the word big rat, the capitals representing the figures in the date. Comment is unnecessary. The student will find that nearly all the systems or secret methods that are being offered for sale in courses, often at a very high price, are merely variations, improvements upon, or combinations of the three forms of artificial methods named above. New changes are constantly being worked on these old plans, new tunes played on the same old instruments, new chimes sounded from the same old bells. And the result is ever the same, in these cases disappointment and disgust. There are a few natural systems on the market, nearly all of which contain information and instruction. that makes them worth the price at which they are sold. As for the others, well, judge for yourself after purchasing them, if you so desire. Regarding these artificial and fanciful sys. Thames, K says, all such systems for the improvement of the memory belong to what? 46 Memory. We have considered the first or lowest form of it. They are for the most part based on light or foolish associations which have little foundation in nature, and are hence of little practical utility, and they do not tend to improve or strengthen the memory as a whole. Bacon says that these systems are barren and useless, adding, for immediately to repeat a multitude of names or words once repeated before, I esteem no more than rope dancing, antic postures, and feats of activity. And, indeed, they are nearly the same things. The one being the abuse of the bodily as the other of the mental powers, and though they may cause admiration, they cannot be highly esteemed. And as another authority has said, the systems of mnemonics as taught, are no better than crutches, useful to those who cannot walk, but impediments and hindrances to those who have the use of their limbs, and who only require to exercise them properly in order to have the full use of them. In this work, there shall be no attempt to teach any of these trick systems that the memory systems 47 student may perform for the amusement of his friends. Instead, there is only the desire to aid in developing the power to receive impressions, to register them upon the memory, and readily to reproduce them at will, nay to rally and easily. The lines of natural mental action will be followed throughout. The idea of this work is not to teach how one may perform feats of memory, but, instead, to instruct in the intelligent and practical use of the memory in the affairs of everyday life and work. Chapter V. The Subconscious Record File. The old writers on the subject were wont to consider the memory as a separate faculty of the mind, but this idea disappeared before the advancing tide of knowledge which resulted in the acceptance of the conception now known as the new psychology. This new conception recognizes the existence of a vast out of consciousness region of the mind, one phase of which is known as the subconscious mind, or the subconscious field of mental activities. In this field of mentation the activities of memory have their seat. A careful consideration of the subject brings the certainty that the entire work of the memory is performed in this subconscious region of the mind. Only when the subconscious record is represented to the conscious field, and recollection or remembrance results, does the memorized idea or impression emerge from the subconscious region. An understanding of 48. Subconscious Record File 49. This fact simplifies the entire subject of the memory, and enables us to perfect plans and methods whereby the memory may be developed, improved and trained, by means of the direction of the subconscious activities by the use of the conscious faculties and the will. Herring says, memory is a faculty not only of our conscious states, but also, and much more so, of our unconscious ones. Kay says, it is impossible to understand the true nature of memory, or how to train it aright, unless we have a clear conception of the fact that there is much in the mind of which we are unconscious. The highest form of memory, as of all the mental powers, is the unconscious, when what we wish to recall comes to us spontaneously, without any conscious thought or search for Frequently when we wish to recall some thing that has previously been in the mind, we are unable to do so by any conscious effort of the will, but we turn the attention to some thing else, and after a time the desired information comes up spontaneously when we are not consciously thinking of it. Karpin. 50 Memory. Ter says, there is the working of a mechanism beneath the consciousness which, when once set going, runs on of itself, and which is more likely to evolve the desired result when the conscious activity of the mind is exerted in a direction altogether different. This subconscious region of the mind is the great record file of everything we have ever experienced, thought, or known. Everything is recorded there. The best authorities now generally agree that there is no such thing as an absolute forgetting of even the most minute impression, notwithstanding the fact that we may be unable to recollect or remember it, owing to its faintness, or lack of associated indexing. It is held that every thing is to be found in that subconscious index file, if we can only manage to find its place. K says, in like manner we believe that every impression or thought that has once been before consciousness remains ever afterward impressed upon the mind. It may never again come up before consciousness, but it will doubtless remain in that vast ultra-conscious region of the mind, uncon. Subconscious record file 51. Consciously molding and fashioning our subsequent thoughts and actions. It is only a small part of what exists in the mind that we are conscious of. There is always much that is known to be in the mind that exists in it unconsciously, and must be stored away somewhere. We may be able to recall it into consciousness when we wish to do so, but at other times the mind is unconscious of its existence. Further, everyone's experience must tell him that there is much in his mind that he cannot always recall when he may wish to do so much that he can recover only after a labored search, or that he may search for in vain at the time, but which may occur to him afterwards when perhaps he is not thinking about it. Again, much that we probably would never be able to recall, or that would not recur to us under ordinary circumstances, we may remember to have had in the mind when it is mentioned to us by others. In such a case there must still have remained some trace or scintilla of it in the mind for we could recognize it as having been there before. 52 Memory. Morel says, we have every reason to believe that mental power when once called forth follows the analogy of everything we see in the material universe in the fact of its perpetuity. Every single effort of mind is a creation which can never go back again into non-entity. It may slumber in the depths of forgetfulness as light and heat slumber in the coal seams, but there it is, ready at the bidding of some appropriate stimulus to come again out of the darkness into the light of consciousness. BD says, that which has been long forgotten, nay, that which we have often in vain endeavored to recollect, will sometimes without an effort of ours occur to us on a sudden, and, if I may so speak, of its own accord. Hamilton says, the mind frequently contains whole systems of knowledge which, though in our normal state they may have faded into absolute oblivion, may in certain abnormal states, as madness, delirium, somnambulism, catalepsy, etc., flash out into luminous consciousness. 4. Example, there are cases in which the extinct memory of whole languages were suddenly Subconscious Ecord File 53. Stored. Lecky says, it is now fully established that a multitude of events which are so completely forgotten that no effort of the will can revive them, and that the state meant of them calls up no reminiscences, may nevertheless be, so to speak, embedded in the memory, and may be reproduced with intense vividness under certain physical conditions. In proof of the above, the authorities give many instances recorded in scientific annals. Coleridge relates the well-known case of the old woman who could neither read nor write, who when in the delirium of fever incessantly recited in very pompous tones long passages from the Latin, Greek and Hebrew, with a distinct enunciation and precise rendition. Notes of her ravings were taken down by shorthand, and caused much wonderment, until it was afterwards found that in her youth she had been employed as a servant in the house of a clergyman who was in the habit of walking up and down in his study reading aloud from his favorite classical and religion writers. In his books were found marked passages corresponding to the notes taken. 54. Memory. From the girl's ravings. Her subconscious memory had stored up the sounds of these passages heard in her early youth, but of which she had no recollection in her normal state. Beaufort, describing his sensations just before being rescued from drowning, says, every incident of my former life seemed to glance across my recollection in a retrograde procession, not in mere outline, but in a picture filled with every minute and collateral feature, thus forming a panoramic view of my whole existence. Kay truly observes, by adopting the opinion that every thought or impression that had once been consciously before the mind is ever afterwards retained, we obtain light on many obscure mental phenomena, and a specie ally do we draw from it the conclusion of the perfectibility of the memory to an almost unlimited extent. We cannot doubt that, could we penetrate to the lowest depths of our mental nature, we should there find traces of every impression we have received, every thought we have entertained, and every act we have done through our past life, each one. Subconscious Echo at File 55. Making its influence felt in the way of building up our present knowledge, or in guiding our everyday actions, and if they persist in the mind, might it not be possible to recall most if not all of them into consciousness, when we wished to do so, if our memories or powers of recollection were what they should be. As we have said, this great subconscious region of the mind, this memory region, may be thought of as a great record file, with an intricate system of indexes, and office boys whose business it is to file away the records, to index them, and to find them when needed. The records record only what we have impressed upon them by the attention, the degree of depth and clearness depending entirely upon the degree of attention which we bestowed upon the original impression. We can never expect to have the office boys of the memory bring up anything that they have not been given to file away. The indexing and cross-references are supplied by the association existing between the various impressions. The more cross-references, or as 56 memory associations that are connected with an idea, thought or impression that is filed away in the memory, the greater the chances of it being found readily when wanted. These two features of attention and association, and the parts they play in the phenomena of memory, are mentioned in detail in other chapters of this book. These little office boys of the memory are an industrious and willing lot of little chaps, but like all boys they do their best work when kept in practice. Idleness and lack of exercise cause them to become slothful and careless, and forgetful of the records under their charge. A little fresh exercise and work soon take the cobwebs out of their brains, and they spring eagerly to their tasks. They become familiar with their work when exercised early, and soon become very expert. They have a tendency to remember, on their own part, and when a certain record is called for, often they grow accustomed to its place, and can find it without referring to the indexes at all. But their trouble comes from faint and almost illegible records, caused by poor subconscious record file 57. Attention, these they can scarcely decipher. When they do succeed in finding them, lack of proper indexing by associations causes them much worry and extra work, and sometimes they are unable to find the records at all from this neglect. Often, however, after they have told you that they could not find a thing, and you have left the place in disgust, they will continue their search and hours afterward will surprise you by handing you the desired idea, or impression, which they had found carelessly indexed or improperly filed away. In these chapters you will be helped, if you will carry in your mind these little office boys of the memory record file, and the hard work they have to do for you, much of which is made doubly burdensome by your own neglect and carelessness. Treat these little fellows right and they will work overtime for you, willingly and joyfully. But they need your assistance and encouragement, and an occasional word of praise and commendation. Chapter 6. Attention. As we have seen in the preceding chapters, before one can expect to recall or remember a thing, that thing must have been impressed upon the records of his subconsciousness, distinctly and clearly. And the main factor of the recording of impressions is that quality of the mind that we call attention. All the leading authorities on the subject of memory recognize and teach the value of attention in the cultivation and development of the MEM. Ori Tupper says, memory, the daughter of attention, is the teeming mother of wisdom. 9 Lowell says, attention is the stuff that memory is made of, and memory is AC. Cumulated genius. Hall says, in the power of fixing the attention lies the most precious of the intellectual habits. Locke says, when the ideas that offer themselves are taken notice of, and, as it were, registered in the memory, it is attention. Stewart. 58. Attention 59. Says, the permanence of the impression which anything leaves on the memory, is proportionate to the degree of attention which was originally given to it. Thompson says, the experiences most permanently impressed upon consciousness are those upon which the greatest amount of attention has been fixed. Beattie says, the force wherewith anything strikes the mind is generally in proportion to the degree of attention bestowed upon it. The great art of MEM. Ori is attention. Inattentive people have always bad memories. Kay says, it is generally held by philosophers that without some degree of attention no impression of any duration could be made on the mind, or laid up in the memory. Hamilton says, it is a law of the mind that the intensity of the present consciousness determines the vacity of the future memory. Memory and consciousness are thus in the direct ratio of each other. Vivid consciousness, long mem. Ori, faint consciousness, short memory, no consciousness, no memory. An act of attention, that is an act of concentration. 60 memory. Seems thus necessary to every exertion of consciousness, as a certain contraction of the pupil is requisite to every exertion of vision. Attention, then, is to consciousness what the contraction of the pupil is to sight, or to the eye of the mind what the microscope or telescope is to the bodily eye. It constitutes the better half of all intellectual power. We have quoted from the above authorities at considerable length, for the purpose of pressing upon your mind the importance of this subject of attention. The subconscious regions of the mind are the great storehouses of the mental records of impressions from within and without. Its great systems of filling, recording, and indexing these records constitute that which we call memory. But before any of this work is possible, impressions must first have been received. And, as you may see from the quotations just given, these impressions depend upon the power of attention given to the things making the impressions. If there has been given great attention, there will be clear and deep impressions. If there has been given but average attention, 61, there will be but average impressions. If there has been given but faint attention, there will be but faint impressions. If there has been given no attention, there will be no records. One of the most common causes of poor attention is to be found in the lack of interest. We are apt to remember the things in which we have been most interested, because in that outpouring of interest there has been a high degree of attention manifested. A man may have a very poor memory for many things, but when it comes to the things in which his interest is involved, he often remembers the most minute details. What is called involuntary attention is that form of attention that follows upon interest, curiosity, or desire. No special effort of the will being required in it. What is called voluntary attention is that form of attention that is bestowed upon objects not necessarily interesting, curious, or attractive. This requires the application of the will, and is a mark of a developed character. Every person has more or less involuntary attention, while but few possess devil. 62 memory. Op-ed voluntary attention. The former is instinctive, the latter comes only by practice and training. But there is this important point to be remembered, that interest may be developed by voluntary attention bestowed and held upon an object. Things that are originally lacking insufficient interest to attract the involuntary attention may develop a secondary interest if the voluntary attention be placed upon and held upon them. As Halleck says on this point, when it is said that attention will not take a firm hold on an uninteresting thing, we must not forget that anyone not shallow and fickle can soon discover some thing interesting in most objects. Here cultivated minds show their especial superiority, for the attention which they are able to give generally ends in finding a pearl in the most uninteresting looking oyster. When an object necessarily loses interest from one point of view, such minds discover in it new attributes. The essence of genius is to present an old thing in new ways, whether it be some force in nature or some aspect of humanity. Attention 63. It is very difficult to teach another person how to cultivate the attention. This because the whole thing consists so largely in the use of the will, and by faithful practice and persistent application. The first requisite is the determination to use the will. You must argue it out with yourself, until you become convinced that it is necessary and desirable for you to acquire the art of voluntary attention. You must convince yourself beyond reason able doubt. This is the first step, and one more difficult than it would seem at first sight. The principal difficulty in it lies in the fact that to do the thing you must do some active, earnest thinking, and the majority of people are too lazy to indulge in such mental effort. Having mastered this first step, you must induce a strong burning desire to acquire the art of voluntary attention. You must learn to want it hard. In this way you induce a condition of interest and attractiveness where it was previously lacking. Third and last, you must hold your will firmly and persist intently to the task, and practice faithfully. Begin by turning your attention upon some 64 memory uninteresting thing and studying its details until you are able to describe them. This will prove very tiresome at first, but you must stick to it. Do not practice too long at a time. At first, take a rest and try it again later. You will soon find that it comes easier, and that a new interest is beginning to manifest itself in the task. Examine this book as practice. Learn how many pages there are in it, how many chapters, how many pages in each chapter, the details of type, printing and binding, all the little things about it, so that you could give another person a full account of the minor details of the book. This may seem uninteresting, and so it will be at first, but a little practice will create a new interest in the petty details, and you will be surprised at the number of little things that you will notice. This plan, practiced on many things, in spare hours, will develop the power of voluntary attention and perception in any one, no matter how deficient he may have been in these things. If you can get someone else to join in the game task with you, and then each endeavor to excel the other in find attention 65 ing details, the task will be much easier, and better work will be accomplished. Begin to take notice of things about you, the places you visit, the things in the rooms, etc. In this way you will start the habit of noticing things. 9. Which is the first requisite for MEM or development. Halleck gives the following excellent advice on this subject: to look at a thing intelligently is the most difficult of all arts. The first rule for the cultivation of accurate perception is, do not try to perceive the whole of a complex object at once. Take the human face as an example. A man, holding an important position to which he had been elected, offended many people because he could not remember faces, and hence failed to recognize individuals the second time he met them. His trouble was in looking at the countenance as a whole. When he changed his method of observation, and noticed carefully the nose, mouth, eyes, chin, and color of hair, he at once began to find recognition easier. He was no longer in difficulty of mistaking A for B, since he remembered that the shape of B's 66 memory nose was different, or the color of his hair at least 3 shades lighter. This example shows that another rule can be formulated. Pay careful attention to details. We are perhaps asked to give a minute description of the exterior of a somewhat noted suburban house that we have lately seen. We reply in general terms, giving the size and color of the house. Perhaps we also have an idea of part of the material used in the exterior construction. We are asked to be exact about the shape of the door, porch, roof, chimneys and windows, whether the windows are plain or circular, whether they have cornices, or whether the trimmings around them are of the same material as the rest of the house. A friend, who will be unable to see the house, wishes to know definitely about the angles of the roof, and the way the windows are ranged with reference to them. Unless we can answer these questions exactly, we merely tantalize our friends by telling them we have seen the house. To see an object merely as an undiscriminated mass of something in a certain place, is to do no more than a donkey accomplishes as he trots along. Attention 67. There are 3 general rules that may be given in this matter of bestowing the voluntary attention in the direction of actually seeing things, instead of merely looking at them. The first is, make yourself taken interest in the thing. The second, see it as if you were taking note of it in order to repeat its details to a friend. This will force you to take notice. The third, give to your subconsciousness a mental command to take note of what you are looking at. Say to it, here, you take note of this and remember it for me. This last consists of a peculiar knack that can be attained by a little practice. It will come to you suddenly, after a few trials. Regarding this third rule, whereby the subconsciousness is made to work for you, Charles Leland has the following to say, though he uses it to illustrate another point. As I understand it, it is a kind of impulse or projection of will into the coming work. I may here illustrate this with a curious fact in physics. If the reader wished to ring a door bell so as to produce as much sound as POS 68 memory Cybele, he would probably pull it as far back as he could, and then let it go. But if he would, in letting it go, simply give it a tap with his forefinger, he would actually double the sound. Or, to shoot an arrow as far as possible, it is not enough to merely draw the bow to its utmost span or tension. If, just as it goes, you will give the bow a quick push, though the effort be trifling, the arrow will fly almost as far again as it would have done without it. Or, if, as is well known, in wielding a very sharp saber, we make the draw cut, that is, if to the blow or chop, as with an axe, we also add a certain slight pull, simultaneously, we can cut through a silk handkerchief or a sheep. Forethought, command to the subconsciousness, is the tap on the bell, the push on the bow, the draw on the saber. It is the deliberate but yet rapid action of the mind when, before dismissing thought, we bid the mind to consequently respond. It is more than merely thinking what we are to do, it is the bidding or ordering the self to fulfill a task before willing it. Attention 69. Remember first, last and always, that before you can remember, or recollect, you must first perceive, and that perception is possible only through attention, and responds in degree to the later. Therefore, it has truly been said that, the great art of memory is attention. Chapter 7. Association. In the preceding chapters we have seen that in order that a thing may be remembered, it must be impressed clearly upon the mind in the first place, and that in order to obtain a clear impression there must be a manifestation of attention. So much for the recording of the impressions. But when we come to recalling, recollecting, or remembering the impressions, we are brought face to face with an other important law of memory, the law of association. Association plays a part analogous to the indexing and cross-indexing of a book, a library, or another system in which the aim is to readily find something that has been filed away, or contained in some way in a collection of similar things. As Kay says, in order that what is in the memory may be recalled or brought again before consciousness, it is necessary that it be regarded in connection, or in association with one or more. 70. Association 71. Other things or ideas, and as a rule the greater the number of other things with which it is associated, the greater the likelihood of its recall. The two processes are involved in every act of memory. We must first impress, and then we must associate. Without a clear impression being formed, that which is recalled will be indistinct and inaccurate, and unless it is associated with something else in the mind, it cannot be recalled. If we may suppose an idea existing in the mind by itself, unconnected with any other idea, its recall would be impossible. All the best authorities recognize and teach the importance of this law of association in connection with the memory. Abercrombie says, next to the effect of attention is the remarkable influence produced upon memory by association. 9. Carpenter says, the recording power of memory mainly depends upon the degree of attention we give to the idea to be remembered. The reproducing power again altogether depends upon the nature of the associations by which the new idea has been linked onto other ideas which 72 memory have been previously recorded. Ribbett says, the most fundamental law which regulates psychological phenomena is the law of association. In its comprehensive character it is comparable to the law of attraction in the physical world. Mill says, that which the law of gravitation is to astronomy, that which the elementary properties of the tissues are to physiology, the law of association of ideas is to psychology. Stewart says, 1. The connection between memory and the and association of ideas is so striking that it has been supposed by some that the whole of the phenomena might be resolved into this principle. The association of ideas connects our various thoughts with each other, so as to present them to the mind in a certain order. But it presupposes the existence of those thoughts in the mind. In other words, it presupposes a faculty of retaining the knowledge which we acquire. On the other hand, it is evident that without the associating principle, the power of retaining our thoughts, and of recognizing them when they occur to us, would have been of little use, for the association 73 most important articles of our knowledge might have remained latent in the mind, even when those occasions presented themselves to which they were immediately applicable. Association of ideas depends upon two principles known, respectively, as 1. The law of contiguity, and 2. The law of similarity. Association by contiguity is that form of association by which an idea is linked, connected, or associated with the sensation, thought, or idea immediately preceding it, and that which directly follows it. Each idea, or thought, is a link in a great chain of thought being connected with the preceding link and the succeeding link. Association by similarity is That form of association by which an idea, thought, or sensation is linked, connected, or associated with ideas, thoughts, or sensations of a similar kind, which have occurred previously or subsequently. The first form of association is the relation of sequence, the second the relation of kind. Association by contiguity is the great law of thought, as well as of memory. As K. says, the great law of mental association. 74 Memory is that of contiguity, by means of which sensations and ideas that have been in the mind together or in close succession, tend to unite together, or cohere in such a way that the one can afterward recall the other. The connection that naturally subsists between a sensation or idea in the mind, and that which immediately preceded or followed it, is of the strongest and most intimate nature. The two, strictly speaking, are but one, forming one complete thought. As Taine says, to speak correctly, there is no isolated or separate sensation. A sensation is a state which begins as a continuation of preceding ones, and ends by losing itself in those following it. It is by an arbitrary severing, and for the convenience of language, that we set it apart. As we do, its beginning is the end of another, and its ending the beginning of another. As Abbott says, when we read or hear a sentence, for example, at the commencement of the fifth word, something of the fourth word still remains. Association by contiguity may be separated into two subclasses: contiguity in time, and contiguity in space. In Association 75, contiguity in time, there is manifested the tendency of the memory to recall the impressions in the same order in which they were received. The first impression suggesting the second, and that the third, and so on. In this way the child learns to repeat the alphabet, and the adult the succeeding lines of a poem. As Priestley says, in a poem, the end of each preceding word being connected with the beginning of the succeeding one, we can easily repeat them in that order. But we are not able to repeat them backwards, till they have been frequently named in that order. Memory of words, or groups of words, depends upon this form of contiguous association. Some persons are able to repeat long poems from beginning to end, with perfect ease, but are unable to repeat any particular sentence, or verse, without working down to it from the beginning. Contiguity in space is manifested in forms of recollection or remembrance by position. Thus by remembering the things connected with the position of a particular thing, we are enabled to recall the thing itself. As we have seen in a pre-76 memory seating chapter, some forms of memory SYS have been based on this law. If you will recall some house or room in which you have been, you will find that you will remember one object after another, in the order of the relative positions, or contiguity in space, or position. Beginning with the front hall, you may travel in memory from one room to another, recalling each with the objects it contains, according to the degree of attention you bestowed upon them originally. K says of association by contiguity, it is on this principle of contiguity that many mnemonical systems are constructed, as when what we wish to remember is associated in the mind with a certain object or locality, the ideas associated will at once come up, or when each word or idea is associated with the one immediately preceding it, so that when the one is recalled the other comes up along with it, and thus long lists of names or long passages of books can be readily learnt by heart. From the foregoing, it will be seen that it is of great importance that we correlate our Association 77 impressions with those preceding and following. The more closely knitted together our impressions are, the more closely will they cohere, and the greater will be the facility of remembering or recollecting them. We should endeavor to form our impressions of things so that they will be associated with other impressions in time and space. Every other thing that is associated in the mind with a given thing serves as a loose end of memory, which if once grasped and followed up will lead us to the thing we desire to call to mind. Association by similarity is the linking together of impressions of a similar kind, ir. respective of time and place. Carpenter expresses it as follows: I. The law of similarity expresses the general fact that any present state of consciousness tends to revive previous states which are similar to it. Rational or philosophical association is when a fact or statement on which the attention is fixed is associated with some fact previously known, to which it has a relation, or with some subject which it is calculated to illustrate. 78 Memory trait. And as Kay says, the similars may be widely apart in space or in time, but they are brought together yet associated through their resemblance to each other. Thus, a circumstance of today may recall circumstances of a similar nature that occurred perhaps at very different times, and they will become associated together in the mind, so that afterwards the presence of one will tend to recall the others. Abercrombie says of this phase of association, the habit of correct association, that is, connecting facts in the mind according to their true relations, and to the manner in which they tend to illustrate each other, is one of the principal means of improving the memory, particularly that kind of memory which is an essential quality of a cultivated mind, namely, that which is founded not upon incidental connections, but on true and important relations. As Beattie says, the more relations or likenesses that we find or can establish between objects, the more easily will the view of one lead us to recollect the rest. And as Kay says, in order to fix a thing in the Association 79 memory, we must associate it with something in the mind already, and the more closely that which we wish to remember resembles that with which it is associated, the better is it fixed in the memory, and the more readily is it recalled. If the two strongly resemble each other, or are not to be distinguished from each other, then the association is of the strongest kind. The memory is able to retain and replace a vastly greater number of ideas, if they are associated or arranged on some principle of similarity, than if they are presented merely as isolated facts. It is not by the multitude of ideas, but the want of arrangement among them, that the memory is burdened and its powers weakened. As Arnott says, the ignorant man may be said to have charged his 100 hooks of knowledge, to use a rude simile, with single objects, while the informed man makes each hook support a long chain to which thousands of kindred and useful things are attached. We ask each student of this book to acquaint himself with the general idea of the working features of the law of association as AD memory, given in this chapter for the reason that much of the instruction to be given under the head of the several phases and classes of Memory is based upon an application of the law of association, in connection with the law of attention. These fundamental principles should be clearly grasped before one proceeds to the details of practice and exercise. 1. Should know not only how to use the mind and memory in certain ways, but also why it is to be used in that particular way. By understanding the reason of it, one is better able to follow out the directions. Chapter 8. Phases of memory. One of the first things apt to be noticed by the student of memory is the fact that there are several different phases of the manifestation of memory. That is to say, that there are several general classes into which the phenomena of memory may be grouped, and accordingly we find some persons quite highly developed in certain phases of memory, and quite deficient in others. If there were but one phase or class of memory, then a person who had developed his memory along any particular line would have at the same time developed it equally along all the other lines. But this is far from being the true state of affairs. We find men who are quite proficient in recalling the impression of faces, while they find it very difficult to recall the names of the persons whose faces they remember. Others can remember faces and not names. Others have an excellent 81. 82 memory, recollection of localities, while others are constantly losing themselves. Others remember dates, prices, numbers, and figures generally, while deficient in other forms of recollection. Others remember tales, incidents, anecdotes, etc., while forgetting other things. And so on, each person being apt to possess a memory good in some phases, while deficient in others. The phases of memory may be divided into two general classes, namely, 1. Memory of sense impressions, and 2. Memory of ideas. This classification is somewhat arbitrary, for the reason that sense impressions develop into ideas, and ideas are composed to a considerable extent of sense impressions, but in a general way the classification serves its purpose, which is the grouping together of certain phases of the phenomena of memory. Memory of sense impressions of course includes the impressions received from all of the five senses: sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. But when we come down to a practical examination of sense impressions retained in the memory, we find that the phases of memory 83. Majority of such impressions are those obtained through the two respective senses of sight and hearing. The impressions received from the sense of taste, touch, and smell, respectively, are comparatively small, except in the cases of certain experts in special lines, whose occupation consists in acquiring a very delicate sense of taste, smell, or touch, and correspondingly a fine sense of memory along these particular lines. For instance, the wine taster and tea tasters, who are able to distinguish between the various grades of merchandise handled by them, have developed not only very fine senses of taste and smell, but also a remarkable memory of the impressions previously received, the power of discrimination depending as much upon the memory as upon the special sense. In the same way the skilled surgeon as well as the skilled mechanic acquires a fine sense of touch, and a correspondingly highly developed memory of touch impressions. But, as we have said, the greater part of the sense impressions stored away in our memories are those previously received. 84 memory, through the senses of sight and hearing, respectively. The majority of sense impressions, stored away in the memory, have been received more or less involuntarily, that is, with the application of but a slight degree of attention. They are more or less indistinct and hazy, and are recalled with difficulty, the remembrance of them generally coming about without conscious effort, according to the law of association. That is, they come principally when we are thinking about something else upon which we have given thought and attention, and with which they have been as associated. There is quite a difference between the remembrance of sense impressions received in this way, and those which we record by the bestowal of attention, interest, and concentration. The sense impressions of sight are by far the most numerous in our subconscious store house. We are constantly exercising our sense of sight, and receiving thousands of different sight impressions every hour. But the majority of these impressions are but faintly recorded upon the memory, because phases of memory 85. We give to them but little attention or interest. But it is astonishing, at times, when we find that when we recall some important event or incident we also recall many faint sight impressions of which we did not dream we had any record. To realize the important part played by sight impressions in the phenomena of memory, recall some particular time or event in your life, and see how many more things that you saw are remembered, paired with the number of things that you heard, or tasted, or felt or smelled. Second in number asterisk however, are the impressions received through the sense of hearing, and consequently the memory stores away a great number of sound impressions. In some cases the impressions of sight and sound are joined together, as for instance in the case of words, in which not only the sound, but the shape of the letters composing the word, or rather the word shape itself, are stored away together, and consequently are far more readily remembered or recollected than things of which but one sense impression is recorded. Teachers of memory use 86 Memoki. This fact as a means of helping their students to memorize words by speaking them aloud and then writing them down. Many persons memorize names in this way, the impression of the written word being added to the impression of the sound, thus doubling the record. The more impressions that you can make regarding a thing, the greater are the chances of your easily recollecting it. Likewise it is very important to attach an impression of a weaker sense to that of a stronger one, in order that the former may be memorized. For instance, if you have a good eye memory, and a poor ear memory, it is well to attach your sound impressions to the sight impressions. And if you have a poor eye memory, and a good ear memory, it is important to attach your sight impressions to your sound impressions. In this way you take advantage of the law of association, of which we have told you. Under the subclass of sight impressions are found the smaller divisions of memory, known as memory of locality, memory of figures, memory of form, memory of color, and phases of memory 87. Memory of written or printed words. Under the subclass of sound impressions are found the smaller divisions of memory known as memory of spoken words, memory of names, memory of stories, memory of music, etc. We shall pay special attention to these forms of memory in succeeding chapters. The second general class of memory. Memory of ideas includes the memory of facts, events, thoughts, lines of reasoning, etc., and is regarded as higher in the scale than the memory of sense impressions, AL. Though not more necessary nor useful to the average person. This form of memory of course accompanies the higher lines of intellectual effort and activities, and constitutes a large part of what is known as true education, that is education which teaches one to think instead of to merely memorize certain things taught in books or lectures. The well-rounded man, mentally, is he who has developed his memory on all sides, rather than the one who has developed but one SPE. Chale phase of the faculty. It is true that a man's interest and occupation certainly tend 88 memoe to develop his memory according to his daily needs and requirements, but it is well that he should give to the other parts of his MEM or he field some exercise, in order that he may not grow one-sided. As Halleck has said, many persons think that memory is mainly due to sight, but we have as many different kinds of memory as we have senses. 2. Sight. The watermelon is a long greenish body, but this is its least important quality. Sight alone gives the poorest idea of the watermelon. We approach the vine where the fruit is growing, and in order to decide whether it is ripe, we tap the rind and judge by the sound. We must remember that a ripe watermelon has a certain resonance. By passing our hands over the melon, we learn that it has certain touch characteristics. We cut it open and learn the qualities of taste and smell. All this knowledge afforded by the different senses must enter into a perfected memory image. Hence we see that many complex processes go to form an idea of a thing. Napoleon was not content with only hearing a name. He wrote it down, and HAV. Phases of memory 89. Ing satisfied his eye memory as well as his ear memory, he threw the paper away. In this book we shall point out the methods and processes calculated to round out the memory of the student. As a rule, his strong phases of memory need but little attention. Although even in these a little scientific knowledge will be of use. But in the weaker phases, those phases in which his memory is poor, he should exert a new energy and activity, to the end that these weaker regions of the MEM ori may be cultivated and fertilized, and well stored with the seed impressions, which will bear a good crop in time. There is no phase, field, or class of memory that is not capable of being highly developed by intelligent application. It requires practice, exercise and work, but the reward is great. Many a man is handicapped by being deficient in certain phases of memory, while proficient in others. The remedy is in his own hands, and we feel that in this book we have given to each the means whereby he may acquire a good memory along any or all lines. Chapter 9. Training the eye. Before the memory can be stored with sight impressions, before the mind can recollect or remember such impressions, the eye must be used under the direction of the attention. We think that we see things when we look at them, but in reality we see but few things, in the sense of registering clear and distinct impressions of them upon the tablets of the sub-conscious mind. We look at them rather than see them. Halleck says regarding this sight without seeing idea, a body may be imaged on the retina without ensuring perception. There must be an effort to concentrate the attention upon the many things which the world presents Sense to our senses. A man once said to the pupils of a large school, all of whom had seen cows, "I should like to find out how many of you know whether a cow's ears are above, below, behind, or in front of her horns." I-90. Training the I-91. Want only those pupils to raise their hands who are sure about the position and who will promise to give $1 to charity if they swear wrong. Only 2 hands were raised. Their owners had drawn cows and in order to do that had been forced to concentrate their attention upon the anim and ls. 15 pupils were sure that they had seen cats climb trees and descend them. There was unanimity of opinion that the cats went up heads first. When asked whether the cats came down head or tail first, the majority were sure that the cats descended, as they were never known to do. Anyone who had ever noticed the shape of the claws of any beast of prey could have answered the question without seeing an actual descent. Farmers' boys who have often seen cows and horses lie down and rise are seldom sure whether the animals rise with their fore or hind feet first, or whether the habit of the horse agrees with that of the cow in this respect. The elm tree has about its leaf a peculiarity which all ought to notice the first time they see it, and yet only about 5% of a certain school could incorporate in a drawing this peculiarity, although 92 maybe. It is so easily outlined on paper. Perception, to achieve satisfactory results, must summon the will to its aid to concentrate the attention. Only the smallest part of what falls upon our senses at any time is actually perceived. The way to train the mind to receive clear sight impressions, and therefore to retain them in the memory, is simply to concentrate the will and attention upon objects of sight, endeavoring to see them plainly and distinctly, and then to practice recalling the details of the objects some time afterward. It is astonishing how rapidly one may improve in this respect by a little practice. And it is amazing how great a degree of proficiency in this practice one may attain in a short time. You have doubtless heard the old story of Houdin, the French conjurer, who cultivated his memory of sight impressions by following a simple plan. He started into practice by observing the number of small objects in the Paris shop windows he could see and remember in one quick glance as he rapidly walked past the window. He followed the plan of noting down on paper the things that he saw and remembered. At first he could, training the I-93, remember but 2 or 3 articles in the window. Then he began to see and remember more, and so on, each day adding to his power of perception and memory, until finally he was able to see and remember nearly every small article in a large shop window, after bestowing but one glance upon it. Others have found this plan an excellent one, and have developed their power of perception greatly, and at the same time cultivated an amazingly retentive memory of objects thus seen. It is all a matter of use and practice. The experiment of Houdin may be varied infinitely, with excellent results. The Hindus train their children along these lines, by playing the sight game with them. This game is played by exposing to the sight of the children a number of small objects, at which they gaze intently, and which are then withdrawn from their sight. The children then endeavor to excel each other in writing down the names of the objects which they have seen. The number of objects is small to begin with, but is increased each day, until an astonishing number are perceived. and remembered. 94 Memoby. Rudyard Kipling in his great book, Kim, asterisk, gives an instance of this game, played by Kim and a trained native youth. Lugan. Sahib exposes to the sight of the two boys a tray filled with jewels and gems, allowing them to gaze upon it a few moments before it is withdrawn from sight. Then the competition begins, as follows. See, there are under that paper 5 blue stones, 1 big, 1 smaller, and 3 small, said Kim in all haste. There are 4 green stones, and 1 with a hole in it. There is 1 yellow stone that I can see through, and 1 like a pipe stem. There are 2 red stones, and give me time. But Kim had reached the limit of his powers. Then came the turn of the native boy. Hear my count / cried the native child. First are 2 flawed sapphires. 1 of 2 ruts and 1 of 4, as I should judge. The 4-rut sapphire is chipped at the edge. There is 1 Turkestan turquoise, plain with green veins, and there are 2 inscribed, one with the name of God in gilt, and the other being cracked across, for it came out of an old ring. I cannot read. We have now the 5 blue stones, 4 flamed, training the I-95. Emeralds there are, but 1 is drilled in 2 places, and 1 is a little carven there. Wait, V, said Lugan Sahib, impassively. Asterisk. 355 and 4 ruddies, as I judge it. There is 1 piece of old greenish amber, and a cheap cut topaz from Europe. There is 1 ruby of Burma, 1 of 2 ruddies, without a flaw. And there is a balas ruby, flawed, of 2 ruddies. There is a carved ivory from China, representing a rat sucking an egg J, and there is last a ball of crystal as big as a bean set in gold leaf / Kim is mortified at his bad beating, and asks the secret. The answer is, by doing it many times over, till it is done perfectly, for it is worth doing. Many teachers have followed plans similar to that just related. A number of small articles are exposed, and the pupils are trained to see and remember them, the process being gradually made more and more difficult. A well-known American teacher was in the habit of rapidly making a number of dots on the blackboard, and then erasing them before the pupils could count them in the ordinary way. The children then endeavored to count 96 memory their mental impressions, and before long they could correctly name the number up to 10 or more, with ease. They said they could see 6, or see 10, as the case may be, automatically and apparently without the labor of consciously counting them. It is related in works dealing with the detection of crime, that in the celebrated thieves' schools in Europe, the young thieves are trained in a similar way, the old scoundrels acting as teachers, exposing a number of small articles to the young ones, and requiring them to repeat exactly what they had seen. Then follows a higher course in which the young thieves are required to memorize the objects in a room, the plan of houses, etc. They are sent forth to spy out the land for future robberies, in the guise of beggars soliciting alms, and thus getting a rapid peep into houses, offices, and stores. It is said that in a single glance they will perceive the location of all of the doors, windows, locks, bolts, etc. Many nations have boys' games in which the youngsters are required to see and remember after taking a peep. The Italians have a game called 1 Moro, in which one boy, training the I-97, throws out a number of fingers, which must be instantly named by the other boy, a fail, you're resulting in a forfeit. The Chinese youths have a similar game, while the Japan SA boys reduce this to a science. A well-trained Japanese youth will be able to remember the entire contents of a room after one keen glance around it. Many of the Orientals have developed this faculty to a degree almost beyond belief. But the principle is the same in all cases: the gradual practice and exercise, beginning with a small number of simple things, and then increasing the number and complexity of the objects. The faculty is not so rare as one might imagine at first thought. Take a man in a small business, and let him enter the store of a competitor, and see how many things lie will observe and remember after a few minutes. Youths in the place. Let an actor visit a play in another theater, and see how many details of the performance he will notice and remember. Some women pay a visit to a new neighbor, and then see how many things about that house they will have seen and remembered. To be retailed to their confidential friends. AF 98 Memory. Word. It is the old story of attention following the interest, and memory following the attention. An expert whist player will see and remember every card played in the game, and just who played it. A chess or checker player will see and remember the previous moves in the game, if he be expert, and can relate them afterward. A woman will go shopping and will see and remember thousands of things that a man would never have seen, much less remembered. As Ho Din said, thus, for instance, I can safely assert that a lady seeing another pass at full speed in a carriage will have had time to analyze her toilette from her bonnet to her shoes, and be able to describe not only the fashion and quality of the stuffs, but also say if the lace be real or only machine-made. I have known ladies to do this. But, remember this, for it is important. Whatever can be done in this direction by means of attention, inspired by interest, may be duplicated by attention directed by will. In other words, the desire to accomplish the task adds and creates an artificial interest, just as effective as the natural feeling and training the I-99. As you progress, the interest in the game task will add new interest, and you will be able to duplicate any of the feats mentioned above. It is all a matter of attention, interest, natural or induced, and practice. Begin with a set of dominoes, if you like, and try to remember the spots on one of them rapidly. Glanced at then 2 then 3. By increasing the number gradually, you will attain a power of perception and a memory of sight impressions that will appear almost marvelous. And not only will you begin to remember dominoes, but you will also be able to perceive and remember thousands of little details of interest in everything that have heretofore escaped your notice. The principle is very simple, but the results that may be obtained by practice are wonderful. The trouble with most of you is that you have been looking without seeing, gazing but not observing. The objects around you have been out of your mental focus. If you will but change your mental focus, by means of will and attention, you will be able to cure yourself of the careless methods of seeing and observing that have been hindrances to 100 memory. Your success You have been blaming it on your memory, but the fault is with your perception. How can the memory remember when it is not given anything in the way of clear impressions? You have been like young infants in this matter. Now it is time for you to begin to sit up and take notice. 9f No matter how old you may be. The whole thing in a nutshell is this: in order to remember the things that pass before your sight, you must begin to see with your mind, instead of with your retina. Let the impression get beyond your retina and into your mind. If you will do this, you will find that memory will do the rest. Chapter X. Training the ear. The sense of hearing is one of the highest of the senses or channels whereby we receive impressions from the outside world. In fact, it ranks almost as high as the sense of sight. In the senses of taste, touch, and smell there is a direct contact between the sensitive recipient nerve substance and the particles of the object sensed, while in the sense of sight and the sense of hearing the impression is received through the medium of waves in the ether, in the case of sight, or waves in the air, in the sense of hearing. Moreover, in taste, smell, and touch the objects sensed are brought into direct contact with the terminal nerve apparatus, while in seeing and hearing, the nerves terminate in peculiar and delicate sacs which contain a fluidic substance through which the impression is conveyed to the nerve proper. Loss of this fluidic substance destroys the faculty to receive impressions, and 101. 102 Memory. Deafness or blindness ensues. As Fostel says, waves of sound falling upon the auditory nerve itself produces no effect whatever. It is only when, by the medium of the endolymph, they are brought to bear on the delicate and peculiar epithelium cells which constitute the peripheral terminations of the nerve, that sensations of sound arise. Just as it is true that it is the mind and not the eye that really sees, so is it true that it is the mind and not the ear that really hears. Many sounds reach the ear that are not registered by the mind. We pass along a crowded street, the waves of many sounds reaching the nerves of the ear, and yet the mind accepts the sounds of but few things, particularly when the novelty of the sounds has passed away. It is a matter of interest and attention in this case, as well as in the case of hearing. As Halleck says, if we sit by an open window in the country on a summer day, we may have many stimuli knocking at the gate of attention: the ticking of a clock, the sound of the wind, the cackling of fowl, the quacking of ducks, the barking of dogs, the lowing of cows, the cries of children at play, the rust. Training the ear 103. Ling of leaves, the songs of birds, the rumbling of wagons, etc. If attention is centered upon any one of these, that for the time being acquires the importance of a king upon the throne of our mental world. Many persons complain of not being able to remember sounds, or things reaching the mind through the sense of hearing, and attribute the trouble to some defect in the organs of hearing. But in so doing they overlook the real cause of the trouble, for it is a scientific fact that many of such persons are found to have hearing apparatus perfectly developed, and in the best working order, their trouble arising from a lack of training of the mental faculty of hearing. In other words, the trouble is in their mind instead of in the organs of hearing. To acquire the faculty of correct hearing, and correct memory of things heard, the mental faculty of hearing must be exercised, trained, and developed. Given a number of people whose hearing apparatus are equally perfect, we will find that some hear much better than others, and some hear certain things better than they do certain other things, and that there is a great 104 memory difference in the grades and degrees of MEM. Ori of the things heard. As Kay says, great differences exist among individuals with regard to the acuteness of this sense hearing, and some possess it in greater perfection in certain directions than in others. One whose hearing is good for sound in general may yet have but little ear for musical tones, and, on the other hand, one with a good ear for music may yet be deficient as regards hearing in general. The secret of this is to be found in the degree of interest and attention bestowed upon the particular thing giving forth the sound. It is a fact that the mind will hear the faint sounds from things in which is centered interest and attention, while at the same time ignoring things in which there is no interest, and to which the attention is not turned. A sleeping mother will awaken at the slightest whimper from her babe, while the rumbling of a heavy wagon on the street, or even the discharge of a gun in the neighborhood may not be noticed by her. An engineer will detect the slightest difference in the whir or hum of his engine, while failing to notice a training the ear 105 very loud noise outside. A musician will note the slightest discord occurring in a concert in which there are a great number of instruments being played, and in which there is a great volume of sound reaching the ear, while other sounds may be unheard by him. The man who taps the wheels of your road car is able to detect the slightest difference in tone, and is thus informed that there is a crack or flaw in the wheel. One who handles large quantities of coin will have his attention drawn to the slightest difference in the ring of a piece of gold or silver, that informs him that there is something wrong with the coin. A train engineer will distinguish the strange whir of something wrong with the train behind him, amidst all the thundering rattle and roar in which it is merged. The foreman in a machine shop in the same manner detects the little strange noise that informs him that something is amiss, and he rings off the power at once. Telegraphers are able to detect the almost imperceptible differences in the sound of their instruments that inform them that a new operator is on the wire, or just who is sending 106 memory the message, and, in some cases, the mood or temper of the person transmitting it. Train men and steamboat men recognize the differences between every engine or boat on their line, or river, as the case may be. A skilled physician will detect the faint sounds denoting a respiratory trouble or a heart murmur in the patients. And yet these very people who are able to detect the faint differences in sound, above mentioned, are often known as poor hearers in other things. Why? Simply because they hear only that in which they are interested, and to which their attention has been directed. That is the whole secret, and in it is also to be found the secret of training of the ear perception. It is all a matter of interest and attention. The details depend upon these principles. In view of the facts just stated, it will be seen that the remedy for poor hearing, and poor memory of things heard is to be found in the use of the will in the direction of voluntary attention and interest. So true is this, that some authorities go so far as to claim that many cases of supposed slight deafness are really but the result of lack of attention. Training the ear 107. And concentration on the part of the person so troubled. K says, what is commonly called deafness is not infrequently to be at tribute to this cause, the sounds being heard, but not being interpreted or recognized. Sounds may be distinctly heard when the attention is directed toward them, that in ordinary circumstances would be imperceptible, and people often fail to hear what is said to them because they are not paying attention. Harvey says, that one half of the deafness that exists is the result of inattention cannot be doubted. There are but few persons who have not had the experience of listening to some bore, whose words were distinctly heard but the meaning of which was entirely lost because of inattention and lack of interest. Kirk sums the matter up in these words: in hearing we must distinguish two different points: the audible sensation as it is developed without any intellectual interference, and the conception which we form in consequence of that sensation. The reason that many persons do not remember things that they have heard is simply because they have not listened properly. Poor 108, Memoki. Listening is far more common than one would suppose at first. A little self-examination will reveal to you the fact that you have fallen into the bad habit of inattention. One cannot listen to everything, of course it would not be advisable. But one should acquire the habit of either really listening or else refusing to listen at all. The compromise of care less listening brings about deplorable results, and is really the reason why so many people can't remember what they have heard. It is all a matter of habit. Persons who have poor memories of ear impressions should be begin to listen in earnest. In order to acquire their lost habit of proper listening, they must exercise voluntary attention and develop interest. The following suggestions may be useful in that direction. Try to memorize words that are spoken to you in conversation, a few sentences, or even one at a time. You will find that the effort made to fasten the sentence on your memory will result in a concentration of the attention on the words of the speaker. Do the same thing when you are listening to a preacher, actor or lecturer. Pick out the first sentence. Training the ear 109. For memorizing, and make up your mind that your memory will be as wax to receive the impression and as steel to retain it. Listen to the stray scraps of conversation that come to your ears while walking on the street, and endeavor to memorize a sentence or two, as if you were to repeat it later in the day. Study the various tones, expressions, and inflections in the voices of persons speaking to you. You will find this most interesting and helpful. You will be surprised at the details that such analysis will reveal. Listen to the footsteps of different persons and endeavor to distinguish between them. Each has its peculiarities. Get someone to read a line or two of poetry or prose to you, and then endeavor to remember it. A little practice of this kind will greatly develop the power of voluntary attention to sounds and spoken words. But above everything else, practice repeating the words and sounds that you have memorized, so far as is possible, for by so doing you will get the mind into the habit of taking an interest in sound impressions. In this way you not only improve the sense of hearing, but also the faculty of remembering.